Did lose my light, and I don't know why.
I think you're officially live.
Are we?
Yeah, it says live in the corner.
All right, let's give people a minute to get in here.
Huh. We'll give it a minute and try it back out. Maybe this got hot.
You want another one? We should have another one.
I already got another one. That's what it was.
Okay, yeah, there's the comment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, we're getting some people in here. Okay, this is working good.
You got 17 so far.
Just joining, folks. We're just going to give a minute or so, get some more folks in here, and then we'll kick this off.
Yeah, everybody's jumping on board here.
That's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Brent, where did you? Why don't you tell us where you you put the information out, posted that you were going to be doing this live stream? I know I saw it on Instagram. Would you put it anywhere else?
Yeah, I posted a. So again, I've never done a live stream before. There was some sort of notification deal that you could do on YouTube that went out.
Nice.
So that went out like an hour and a half, p, maybe 2 hours ago.
Okay.
I like that.
So
I can see you. Camo is ineffective.
All right, looks like there's a decent amount of guys in here. So we'll go ahead and kick this. First and foremost, I appreciate everybody joining on. Last 2 days have been freaking mind-boggling to me. If you don't already know, I am an Afghanistan vet. I also served in Iraq. So, seeing all this unfold has just been a swift kick in the ball sack. And I finally called my good buddy John at UW Gear this morning, talked to him for about an hour about all this. And then I just decided, the conversations we were having about everything were so good that I thought it was a good opportunity to, get that information out to other folks. And I know guys like me are probably, feeling the same thing and probably going through the same emotions and whatnot. So I just want to introduce everybody, and we brought some other players in here. So we got Bruce. If you watch my channel for any amount of time, you know that Bruce is he's like my right-hand man. He's in damn near every video I post. And, he's just a good, great all-American guy and has valuable information to always provide on scene. Les also has a YouTube channel, Pegasus Test. I met him through YouTube, and then we linked up going to One Shepherd together, and now we're both Black Hat instructors with the One Shepherd Leadership Institute. And he's a former Marine, served back in Desert Storm, so he definitely brought an old-timer opinion and everything straightforward, and just a fellow devil dog. Last on our list here, we got John at UW Gear. And he also has a YouTube channel, not only UW Gear YouTube channel, but he also has Alpha Charlie Concepts. And he does a lot more of this, blogging type stuff than I do. And, he's just a great guy. He served back in the early 90s, around the time when Les was in the Army. And he just brings a great perspective to the table as well. So that's everybody that's in here on our panel, I guess you could say. But I just want to start this off by saying that, I've been in the Marine Corps for going on 20 years now. I've served 3 combat tours, 2 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. I served in Afghanistan in late 2010, 2011 timeframe. My battalion deployed there to Helmand Province, and then our respective companies in that battalion spread out throughout Helmand Province. And I had an outstanding deployment. It was a great experience. My company was spread out from Dwyer, which is kind of a super grunt base. They had a helicopter airstrip, and I think they could land C-130s there as well. And from Dwyer, we had patrol bases going all the way up into the Marja District Center. And it was an all-around great experience for us. We did a lot of aerial interdictions where we were trying to. One of the main source of funding for the Taliban was opium, and we would locate these vehicles that match certain descriptions with ground radar and the birds, and then we would drop down on them. The Cobra gunships would stop the vehicles, and then we'd interdict them in 53 helicopters and then search them. And you may have seen, I posted an Instagram photo a couple months back of us actually loading a vehicle into a helicopter, a 53, and that was a vehicle that was completely filled up with dope that the Taliban was transporting. So anyways, long story short, guys, a lot of emotions going through. There hasn't been a major U.S. presence in Afghanistan for a long time. It's not, we've kind of been supporting them for many years now, and that's kind of reflected in the casualties we've taken over the last several years. You can see how U.S. troop involvement there is essentially steadily left, and we've had like a very small skeleton crew there, and we're mainly supporting the Afghan military with air support. And it seems like over the last year or so, the U.S. cut that air support off and, kind of just threw the Afghan National Army to the wind and, said, hey, sink or swim. And then they sunk. So, I got mixed feelings about everything, but I want to turn it over to the panel. I don't want to talk all day long here. So I'm going to turn it over. Which one of you guys wants to talk first? Who wants to jump in?
I think Bruce should.
All right. Well, thanks for volunteering me. Yeah, I mean, we were discussing this earlier, and I mean, I know a lot of the general consensus is that, we really can't discuss the current events without discussing the last two presidents, and that we felt that maybe Trump had a plan, and things I'm absolutely positive would not be the same today over there as they are now if we would have had the former president. At the end of the day, would it have been a whole lot different? I mean, what's the end of the day? I shouldn't say the end of the day, but maybe years from now, I don't know. But at least with our troops and our personnel that are over there, that's really my number one concern right now. It looks like it's a big old mess, and I hate to see that. But a little bit of my history is I was never in the military, so I'm giving, like, I guess, the civilian side of the opinion on whatever we talk about here today, and I feel like that's what I kind of bring to any conversation. But I know that my brother, who's also named Brent, is following this right now, and he did 4 tours. He did 2 in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, and so he's pretty spun up on it, and I'm sure he's feeling the same emotions that pretty much so every vet that ever stepped in the sand over there is feeling, and it's none of them are really good right now. So I'm glad that we don't have any more sacrifice of life, but I also felt like that had pretty much so had already been paid as of a year or more ago, and we were just kind of keeping everything stable and holding the ground as it was to help build a government over there that would bring some of those people something a little different than what their future is probably going to bring them now.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Bruce. I mean, I think there's a real potential there that we could see, like almost like the killing fields that came out of Cambodia again. I mean, the Taliban is not a nice group of people. And we know what they did before the Northern Alliance and their SF advisors knocked them out of power back in 2001. They destroyed religious artifacts. They, required men to have beards. They implemented Sharia law. Women's rights were basically curtailed down to nothing, and they're basically just almost prisoners in their own homes. So it's safe to say that that's going to go back to that. And like when all cases, when you have a notorious force oust the government all throughout history, there's going to be retribution killings, and it's probably going to get really nasty there. Really.
John, why don't you jump in here, man?
Yeah, I think y'all are on the right track. So, as Brent and I kind of already discussed today, was fully in support of us being there and doing what we needed to do. Always have been. But I think we kind of reached the point. It was time for us to go. The problem that I've got is not with us leaving, but that, as I understand it from some folks I've talked to and what I've read, President Trump and the Department of Defense had a very detailed, methodical plan laid out to move everybody out and have all of our American citizens, as well as related foreign nationals that we wanted to bring out of the country in a very organized manner before we pulled the last of the troops out. And from what I understand, as soon as the child sniffer went in, he totally scrapped that plan, threw it away, and we get the resulting chaos that we're getting, which not only is going to cause needless loss of life, but could potentially have long-term ramifications as well as far-reaching global ramifications. It's a much bigger picture than I think some people think about and give it credit for.
I just want to jump in here to piggyback off John's point. There is a bigger picture, in my opinion, and just like what Les said, also, this is not going to be isolated to Afghanistan, as we saw with Vietnam. I mean, you had Laos and Cambodia. You know, those fell, and you had the Khmer Rouge take over, and you know, Afghanistan. Unfortunately, it's going to return to its previous self. The other thing I can say about that is, the Taliban actually wasn't in power very long before September 11th. I think it was only like 4 years. And we've had a presence there for 20 years or so. So you've had a whole generation of, Afghans grow up in an alternative of the Taliban. And my hope right now, and unfortunately, it's not going to be a peaceful solution for the country of Afghanistan, but I don't think those people that have lived in an alternate country, under a different rule where they've had more freedom, are gonna take that for very long. Given the nature of Afghanistan, I think there's going to be a lot more fighting there. It's gonna, they may have folded right now, but I think it's going to spiral into civil conflict again very shortly.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, and I think some of the other things that some people might not be looking at is notice the 2 embassies that are still operating and open and not closed. There's something there to be paying attention to. I have a suspicion, and I could be completely wrong. My suspicion, though, is that you were about to see China become a huge Central Asian power by simply going in, because they've already had delegates meet with Taliban leadership. They can go in, and I don't know that this is what they'll do. I'm just saying they could do this. They could go into the Taliban and say, hey, we'll give you weapons and training and funding and whatever. You run the country however you want to, but let us come in and mine all your natural resources in exchange. Because the Taliban's not exactly out there running mines, pulling out lithium and gold and ores and things like that. But China needs it. So you could make them a huge influence, and they could control it without ever having to fire a shot, just because they don't care what happens there. They just want the natural resources. So it's a win-win for both of them.
No, that's no different than what China's doing all over Africa right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting play here. Just as we saw with the fall of South Vietnam, there were actors behind the scenes. The Russians, the Chinese were helping out the Vietnamese, and they provided them, probably safe to say, hardcore intelligence, definitely the weapons, that goes without saying. It's conjecture, but there was probably Soviet and Chinese advisors for the Vietnamese. And it would be shocking to find out if the Chinese haven't been feeding some type of intelligence and other material support to the Taliban, because the old rule that the enemy of my enemy is my friend still applies.
And just to address something really quick, because some folks have been mentioning it, but y'all just ignore some of the mental retards in the chat, because unfortunately in the continental United States in this day and age, inbreeding is still a thing. And those people do show up on occasion. So just ignore that. You know, pretend like it's the weird one that you don't want to pay attention to. So I know it can be aggravating, but they're out there, unfortunately. It never fails.
Yeah, I ignore those. I stopped replying to those guys a long time ago.
Exactly. That's what I said. Best thing is just ignore them. If you don't give them any attention, they don't have an audience. So,
right. Yeah, I remember back in the day when I kind of first started YouTube channel and whatnot. Like I used to reply to all that stuff, and it just never ends, man. They don't have an end game in sight. they just get a rise out of it. So I just ignore them and/or ban them and move on. So It is what it is.
You know, and they'll try to say stuff like the one guy just did that. Oh, everybody you don't agree with is a troll. No, I have no problem disagreeing with you. It's whenever you act like an inbred jackass. That's when it's a problem.
Well said, sir.
Just
well
say all
said.
you want. I mean, shoot, Brent and I probably got a half dozen things we can disagree about, but I still consider him a friend.
So, anyways, go back to conversation about it.
He probably likes the orange flavored crayons better than the grape ones, and I think the grape ones are better.
Anyways, so go back to Afghanistan, fellas. One of the biggest things that's disheartening, though, is all the weapon systems that we're leaving behind. I remember 2 years ago, you had a battalion commander and a battalion sergeant major relieved because some 2 rifles and a flak jacket went missing by a Marine platoon that was out in the field. And I'm looking at all these Taliban fighters. They have M4s, M16s, SAWs, Humvees, MRAPs, the whole 9 yards. Black Hawk helicopters, and who on the higher echelon of leadership is going to resign or step down as a result of that. And I think we all know the answer to that. And that's what really pisses me off and boggles my mind.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Brent's saying, for any of you that don't know, in the military, everything is signed for. Like, you can't get a screw or a nut or a bolt without somebody's name being signed on a piece of paper. So every single piece of equipment that was left over there, no matter how large or how small, somebody somewhere signed for it. And that means they're responsible for it. So that means either somebody made some giant snafus of losing all that equipment, or we just gave it to them. Either way, it's a problem.
Well, I hate to burst your bubble about signing for stuff there, John, but back in 2012, when my company got a contract to move a bunch of gear out of the different FOBs and bring it back to the U.S., when we picked stuff up at the Marine bases, the vehicles were perfect. They were stripped down, packed up perfectly, even the ones that were basically nothing more than scrap that could barely roll. We go to the Army bases, the Army FOBs, weapons still in the vehicle, ammo unencountered, which was a problem for us because when we went to load them on the aircraft to fly them out on civilian aircraft, you can't exactly put a Humvee that's got an M2 mounted on the top, 1,000 rounds in it, and grenades laying everywhere. And that was a common problem, including personal weapons, M4s, M9s, sometimes nods, just left in the vehicle. We try to turn them back into the unit. They didn't care. They're just like, I don't care. It's off the books. I don't care. So I can see where a lot of stuff's been left around because once somebody takes it off the books, no one wants it.
Yeah, no, that's true. You got a point. All I know is back in the 90s, you couldn't get a piece of toilet paper without signing for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to deny there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, I remember going down to Camp Leatherneck and Dwyer too. There was quad-cons, shipping containers all over the fobs there that were completely empty, and they were just sitting there. And I was told that those things are rented by the U.S. government. They're rented, not bought, rented. So every month, the U.S. government was paying like 3/4 of the price to buy them to have these things rented in Afghanistan. And they were just sitting there, unused, empty, and, instead of buying them outright and bringing them over there and then just leaving them or whatever, they were renting those things to just sit there. So, I mean, it's just, the bureaucracy in all this is just, it's disgusting. And you can just see how millions and trillions of dollars were just, wasted in fraud, waste, and abuse over there.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, a lot of those pogues that handle that stuff, there's not so much fraud as it's just waste. I mean, waste is probably 80% of it, which is no excuse, but it's still, I think there's a lot of good people out there checking their boxes and nobody looking into the full consequence of, hey, we have this ocean container we don't need, we leave it here, and yet we pay $3,000 a month rent on it, and nobody thinks of it.
Yeah, and some of the smaller stuff I can see, but when you start getting into some of the more sensitive things or expensive things, I mean, like $3.2 million Scan Eagle drones, that seems to me something that would be kept a little bit tighter tabs on, not just, chunk it in the pile over there and we'll be done with it. I mean.
Yeah, and then you're absolutely right about that. I mean, there's clear lack of accountability here. And for especially older guys like us who were back in the 90s where everything was ridiculously accountable,
Right.
It just almost boggles the mind. You almost can't comprehend it.
Yeah,
I just want to point this comment. I want to put this comment out here that Kilo19 posted. It says harder to turn in ammo than to leave it, and unfortunately, that's 100% accurate.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are so many instances of guys trying to bury ammunition. I'm not even talking about in combat theaters, back in the rear. There's been so many instances of units like burying ammunition in the ground at training areas because they didn't want to go through the hassle and all the red tape of having to turn it back in. So, I mean, how do you get to that point? You know what I mean? I mean, how do you get to that point? That's what leads to losing wars. When you have so much bureaucracy like that, it makes it harder to do the right thing. And I just want to zero in on that real quick because I mean that just absolutely drives me nuts. That's something I've seen my whole career. Not guys and essentially burying it, but I mean you get to sit through hour-long briefs when you go to 29 Palms and showing pictures of like just hundreds, if not thousands, of rounds that were buried by units. Because they didn't want to go through the hassle of turning the stuff in.
Well, it also leads to the first big question there, Brent, is why wasn't the ammo expended properly in the first place? So you got that training deficiency to be dealt with. And why nobody ever thought, like one of the things that used to happen to me early in my Marine Corps career, you get to the end of the fiscal year and we haven't thrown the allotted number of grenades for the squadron. So what happens is a sergeant takes out 4 privates and they throw an entire squadron's worth of grenades in a couple hours. It's like, why couldn't we find the time to do proper grenade training?
Yeah.
Hey, Bruce, you've been really quiet, man. Why don't you jump in here?
Well, I've been soaking it up and reading the comments, but yeah, I mean, I agree that, as a taxpayer that pays for all that cool stuff that you guys get to play with, yeah, it is a little bit concerning that there's so little accountability of it. And trust me, I see the waste on what's going on over there in Afghanistan and anywhere else for that matter. And that's not my primary concern, but it's definitely a concern. It should have definitely been handled differently rather than all that stuff falling into enemy hands. I'm not so much worried about it necessarily being used against us, but just the unbelievable waste. I mean, When we're talking about an M4 rifle, okay, we're talking about a couple $1,000, but when we're talking about a Black Hawk helicopter, that's a lot of money. And when we're talking about a lot of Black Hawk helicopters, that's a whole lot of money, right? And it's disheartening to see that go into disarray. I mean, I know some people were saying, you know, who's going to use it? Well, we got ANA pilots. We had ANA pilots. They may have on the little mushroom cap now and the shamag around their neck, but they still have the skill set to fly those helicopters. I'm not really worried about, you know, any type of serious use of those like against us. But I mean, I guess it's always a terrorist, you know, concern for any nearby country. I see there's a lot of posts here about Israel and whatnot. They're a little closer to that area than we are, but it's concerning, you know, whether the waste is ammunition that's being buried in the ground rather than turned back in, or, you know, that's kind of a microcosm of the much larger issue where we're seeing things like MRAPs and planes and helicopters that are being just turned over completely unaccounted for all throughout Afghanistan. I think that is an issue. And I know, Brent, you touched on that where you were saying, like, you know, who's going to be held accountable for that? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not expecting that anybody will be held accountable for that, given the current administration and what's going on. I believe our military personnel are over there doing the very best that they can with a really shitty situation that they were handed just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I do find it interesting with all the abandoned equipment that we're not seeing flights of helicopters like we did at the fall of Saigon, where like the pilots of the VNAF would gather up their families or whoever and fly out to the ships. Yeah, we don't have a fleet out there, but it's amazing they're not trying to get into a neighboring country.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know. Maybe we haven't seen it yet, right? I mean, we're just a couple of days into this. Let's wait till we're a couple of weeks into this and see how it looks then. I'm not feeling that it's going to be a very pretty picture, though. And I think that it will probably continually to get worse the farther we go on, not better.
No, absolutely. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, the part that's going to suck about this is from here on out, there's not going to be any good news for a while. Matter of fact, probably the next batch of good news we can really hope for is when we get the official word that all the Americans that are on the ground are out and on their way home.
I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, you got a good point. There's like a whole rifle company of Marines at minimum there. I know there's like Army airborne units there that secure that airfield. So, I mean, that could spiral out of control very quickly.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, look at the history books back at the fall of Saigon and everything. You know, you saw those young Marines standing there holding the crowds at bay. You know, as the last people got out on the birds on top of the embassy.
Yeah. Hey, I want to point out this comment, douchebag brother's dick, which you read that, you think he's like a troll, but that guy's got his own YouTube channel. He's actually, so he's got some good stuff, man. But I want to point out something he's saying. So he says, ever wonder why our peers are closing the technology gap? And that's a very good point. And that's why I highlighted his comment, because I want to point out that the Chi-Coms are no longer a near-peer threat. At least as far as the Marine Corps is concerned, they are absolutely a peer threat. And we've had to restructure the whole entire United States Marine Corps to prepare for that threat, because, you know, the Chinese they have their, you know, plan in place, and they're already ahead of schedule and becoming the #1 dominant superpower in the world. And this is another little check in their box. And, you know, they're absolutely no longer a near peer threat. They are absolutely a peer threat. And, you know, all these weapon systems and everything else, not that they haven't got their hands on that stuff already, but if there was anything like a Scan Eagles, you know, and some of the, you know, technology in the Blackhawks and whatnot, I mean, all that stuff, you better believe that's going to communist China.
Oh yeah, I totally wouldn't be surprised if in the very near future, when this calms down, that you know, cargo planes from both Russia and China land there, and the Taliban get paid handsomely for some gear to get loaded up, and it flies back to the Mother Russia or Mama China there. so they can take it apart and copy it. Although, you know, the Chinese already have the Black Hawk, and if they managed to hack enough stuff to make a clone of the F-22, they probably got Scan Eagle type technology already, but they probably wouldn't like having a few more examples to tinker with.
Speaking on that, from what I understand, they've already stole all the information on it and reverse engineered it, but actually having one in hand to compare to their reverse engineering makes all the difference in the world.
And probably a bigger threat, here we are talking about the Chinese, the ones who really benefit from getting their hands on some of that technology will be the damn Iranians.
Yep. And speaking of the Iranians, there was already reports Sunday night and yesterday morning that there was at least one, if not two, full A&A units that drove all their stuff right across the border into Iran. So I don't know what all they had, but they did go there and took all their stuff with them. So however little it was, you know, Iran was tickled pink to get their hands on anything they could that's U.S. made, just to reverse engineer it and study it.
Yeah, and the point about that too is give the Iranians credit where credit's due. They've kept their F-14s flying, they've kept their old Sea Cobras flying, and they've kept them lethal. And we're talking weapon systems that are approaching 50 years of age. So if they get a new infusion of technology, that's only going to help them and hurt us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not denying Iran is a threat, but honestly, I think the communist Chinese are number one.
Oh, absolutely, without question.
China's at the top of the thing, but just to add to the Iran thing, and not to get off in the weeds on it, but there was also an IAEA report come out yesterday. Iran just did a whole bunch of uranium up to 20% on their weapons grade manufacturing. So they're steadily moving along, and everybody keeps saying, no, stop doing that. They do more. No, stop doing that. And they keep doing more.
Yeah, why wouldn't they? They don't suffer any real consequences.
Yeah, and you know, it's like Ronald Reagan said, boys will be boys. And he said that about Israel when they attacked and some of Iran's previous nuclear attempts, but that applies to all boys, regardless of what country they're from. And I think that Iran is going to continue to push the envelope just like any of us would, right up to the edge, and try not to go over the edge. And the envelope just got a whole lot bigger under this administration. I think that they're going to be emboldened to push it a lot more without us getting involved, because we are directly trying to get uninvolved in the Middle East. And I think it's absolutely inevitable until they come up with a nuclear weapon. I mean, let's just think about this, guys. Like we had this technology in what, 1943, 1944, 1945. It's really old technology. It's like 70-something-year-old technology. I'm not directly comparing atomic to nuclear, but what's the difference? If you drop an atomic bomb on a city versus a nuclear bomb on a city, the fallout is going to be absolutely devastating and tremendous, regardless of what the technology is. So it's just a matter of time before they get it if they keep working for it. All we're doing at this point, and all we've been doing for a long time, is just trying to delay that as much as we can. There's going to come a point in time where we have to start coming up with a new plan for when they do have it, then what do we do? And I think that's a very complicated question.
Oh, agree 100%. And piggyback on what you're saying, dropping a nuke in the Middle East, it won't
Anybody
matter.
having connection issues, or is that just me?
I'm still good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
If they drop a 1 megaton or a 1 kiloton or a 10 megaton, the size ain't going to matter how big it is. If they pop a nuke on somebody over there, the repercussions are going to be felt long way.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point, then WW3 is officially kicked off. The only slight silver lining to this could possibly be is since the end of the Second World War, and when the Soviets got the bomb a few years after we had it, was mutually assured destruction have kicked in. And there's only been one nuclear war. That was the end of the Second World War. So one can hope as nations enter that nuclear club, they tend to be a little bit more respectful to their neighbors that have the same capability. I mean,
Yeah.
look at the history of India, Pakistan. They used to have a war every 4 to 5 years. And then once the nukes came along, all of a sudden they've kind of learned to get along with each other, or at least stop killing each other a little bit.
Yeah, they still poke and prod, but they kind of like get right up to the line and then, no, we better back off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and even though that crazy little fat dude up in North Korea has got nukes, you know, he's got no desire to come across that DMZ.
Right.
That's a good point.
The only thing that concerns me about Iran specifically is I think the leadership there is just absolutely crazy enough to not care about that. They'd use it.
Oh yeah, and I do believe that at the same token, not only would they use it, but if the Israelis think it's coming down on them, they're not going to hesitate.
Yep, they won't bat an eye.
Since somebody brought up Korea, I just want to point out something. So Christopher Larson, he's the director of One Shepherd. Let me backtrack. He's the founder of One Shepherd, and he posted some videos recently. He's a veteran of the Korean, I guess, second conflict, you could say. So after the Korean War, you had a big, quiet conflict that was going alongside at the same time in the Vietnam War. And he posted some excellent videos there. And he really opened my eyes in something. And he said from July of 53 to October of 91, which is 38 years, there were U.S. infantry units patrolling that DMZ in which there was constant, sporadic fights that would just have ambushes that took place or convoys that took place. And he said that 1,254 Americans were killed during that time period on U.S. troops patrolling that DMZ area. And, to put that in hindsight, like, I keep hearing, we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. When are we pulling out? Well, here we were in Korea for 38 years. And he still had boots on the ground. It's just they kept it quiet. And, so it's just another thing to think of when you think of in terms of U.S. commitment in Afghanistan. We had a small footprint there. We're still supporting the ANA, and they lasted this long. And it seems like as soon as we cut that, umbilical cord, they just went to shit after that. So makes me wonder if the South Koreans would have been in the same boat had we not supported them whatsoever. If the North would have just, plowed them right over just like they did when they first invaded.
Oh, absolutely, they would have. South Korea is kind of the shining example of when it's done right, because as America, we provided them that shield so they could figure it out. Syngman Rhee, the leader of South Korea during the time of the Korean War and through most of the 1950s, guy was a straight up dictator, and then he was succeeded by other guys who were more benevolent dictators. And it wasn't until about the 1980s that you started to get your forms of representative government. One of the things that we can do as a nation is provide that shield to keep people at bay so the nation in question can kind of figure it out for themselves. You just can't whip some democracy and freedom on people if they're not ready for it. The parallels we get to Germany after World War II, Germany got on its feet really quick. Well, Germany was already essentially a Western-style democracy to start with. If you look back prior to the Nazi regime, the Weimar Republic, or even under the Kaiser, people had lots of rights, lots of social programs, a representative government. Their regions and towns were represented in some form. There wasn't absolute dictatorial powers. When you run into a place like Korea that had more of an absolute dictator thing, it took more time to get that representative government tradition going. But as you can see, once they did, they figured it out, and Korea has become a real powerhouse economically, and their people have a pretty high standard of living. I think the problem you have with Afghanistan is there's no national identity as being an Afghani. Everybody's about their tribe. Tribe will always trump basically, the nation as a whole. So people don't always act in their best interests a lot of times. And if they support their tribe, it's kind of like saying, hey, I'm going to support South Dakota over whatever the best interests of the United States are. And I think that's one of the major problems they have in Afghanistan. And obviously, while they had a president, he got voted because I helped in those elections back in 2005 and 2010. They don't have the strong tradition of voting and the expectations that we do here in the U.S.
Yeah. Hey, Brent.
Yeah.
Somebody just mentioned in the comments, I'm trying to go back and find it. They're scrolling by so fast. Where was it? Somebody was asking if we thought current events might affect proud infidel. I think China will be more emboldened to attack Taiwan. That's something that you and I touched on in our conversations. And I think that the potential is definitely there for them to be more emboldened to do that. Maybe not for the right reasons to be more emboldened, but I think they might very well be. If I was in Taiwan right now, I'll admit I would be thinking real hard about finding somewhere else to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally believe that the Chinese are going to try to poke that portion of the bear just to see how far they can get away with. This is where you have to show up resolve, put the fleet out there to get in their face, have the Marines on their ships ready to go to show the resolve, have the Air Force show their bombers and all that to show, hey, we're here, we're being in our presence. And anytime the Chinese have got uppity, we've done that, and that's always worked. It's really going to come down, does our national leadership have the resolve to go do that?
And that's what worries me right now. Is it's not so much that the pullout of Afghanistan, it's the way it's being done and what our leadership's doing and what the leadership's showing to the rest of the world. Because there was a right way to do this, and it's definitely not been done the right way. And that can send very, very bad signals to the rest of the world. And as we all know, there's a lot of sharks out there, and you start throwing chum in the water, it won't take much for them to suddenly decide, oh, it's feeding time.
Oh yeah, 100%. The whole withdrawal. I mean, let's think about this. 3-4 days ago, the president was saying you won't see helicopters pulling refugees off rooftops, and that the Afghan army is going to hold its own, and everything else, and that Afghan army is this, that, and the other, and they were not going to be defeated by Taliban. And 3-4 days later, completely not what he said at all, not even remotely close. And here we go. Now we got Afghans riding on, wheel wells of C-17s trying to take off. I mean, just the utter incompetence that I've seen over these last few days, it's just unbelievably mind-blowing. I know in the military, specifically in the Marine Corps, when you fail to perform, you're relieved on the spot, and they put somebody in there that can do the job. Unfortunately, that's just not going to be the case.
No, not to get too political, but next year, as a people, that's when we have to give the fail to perform notice.
Segueing back into Taiwan, yes, absolutely. If I was living in Taiwan right now, I'd be shitting bricks right now. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I think the Chinese, they think about everything. Like they're always thinking years ahead, right? And they're not going to make their move until they have all their peace place. But as the years go on, as time goes on, I mean, those pieces they're building islands, for God's sakes, surround Taiwan. That's why the whole Marine Corps is revamping. That's why we don't have tanks anymore. We got rid of tanks so that we can, have more javelins and other weapon systems, more modern weapon systems that can enable us to operate more independently and not rely on, old legacy systems. We're gearing up for this fight, fellas. Whether it comes tomorrow or it comes years from now, I think it's going to happen. But they're not going to make that move until the Chinese believe that they have all their pieces in place.
Right. And just to touch on what you said, Brent, because I know a lot of people flip out different ways on it, but the Marines dropping tanks. What people don't understand is with modern anti-tank systems, like what even tow missiles can do, things that Marines have, like just the LAVs, are more than capable of taking out most foreign armor in the world. And LAVs are a heck of a lot easier for the Marines to move around in mass than freaking M1 Abrams.
Oh, absolutely. The footprint a tank takes up on a Gator freighter is just massive, because it's not only the tank, it's all the consumables the tank needs, plus all the support equipment, the maintenance equipment. I mean,
Right.
You're going to put a whole lot more Marines on the boat with a whole lot more equipment than you are by giving up a platoon of M1s.
Yep. And from what I've been seeing, the Marines have honestly been smart in taking like the LAVs and similar vehicles and employing them like our old Hellcat tank destroyers in World War II. Just move fast and quick and stay hidden. Hit them and move. You know, it's a great concept for Marines, because they can field a lot of them at one time a lot easier. And how do you deal with all those swarming hornets moving around?
Yeah, it's a good point. However, the islands are small and there's limited points of access.
Right.
You know, that's despite all we can say about over the horizon and all our advanced weapon systems. At the end of the day, when you amphibious assault a beach on a small island, it is a plain and simple frontal assault.
Right.
And one of the things, while I like some of the developments the Corps is making, I do worry about the fact that there's not enough Gator freighters out there. I think we're going to find we don't have nearly enough naval gunfire support, because there's only so many missiles in a magazine. And when you're in that frontal assault situation, just mass of firepower counts. Yes, our guns are way more accurate than their World War II equivalents, but sometimes just a whole hell of a lot of steel on target is what matters the most.
Well, did y'all see that recent article that come out where the Navy hadn't said they were pushing forward with it, but there was actually a committee that was exploring bringing a couple of Iowa class back out of mothballs and retrofitting them just to have shore bombardment capability for that exact situation.
No, they are impressive ships. I did get to see them fire in Desert Storm, and if you're not impressed by that, I don't know what will impress you.
Oh, that as a grunt, I will fully say I was in love with freaking Iowa class battleship, because there was just something about freaking 50 caliber 16-inch guns, you know, launching freaking Volkswagens at the enemy that just it makes you smile.
When I think of modern battleships, I think of Miss July '89 popping out of a birthday cake. I don't know what you guys.
Well, it's good to know we have those old battleships, especially when the aliens show up.
See, that's point two. And that showed us how easy they are to bring back out of mothballs too.
Yeah, apparently you just need a bunch of old guys just hanging around the ship.
Yep. Throw a little bit of bunker feed in the boilers and fire it up. Because all the museum ships still have live rounds on them.
Well, another thing we have to consider, gentlemen, is I think if something does pop off with the CCP, I mean, it's going to be I hesitate to say it's going to devolve into nuclear war. I don't think it would be, just because they know we have no intentions of invading mainland China. Because we all see that this conflict escalates because the Chinese invade Taiwan. The Chinese invading Taiwan is by no means justification for U.S. Marines to be storming the beaches of mainland China. That's just not going to happen. So with that being said, I don't see a nuclear option being introduced into that particular conflict. But what I can see are attacks on mainland American power grids. We saw from just a snowstorm in Texas, the vast majority of North Texas was like shut down from weather, natural conditions. You know what I'm saying? So if Mother Nature can do that to our power grid, what the hell can the Chinese do?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh,
And,
look
you
what
know,
we
problems like that back in
already
here in the home front is going to have direct, you know, direct causes and everything else on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, we already know they can hack into the power grid because they've already done it. And then there's articles that come out recently. Some of our really, really, really big transformers that's used at big substations that come from China,
Mm-hmm.
they actually found back doors built into them, and they don't know how to counter it. So people don't realize how easy it would be. And my dad worked for the electrical company here for like 15 years, and it's far easier than what I think most people understand for them to do something that simple.
And I would say I think our infrastructure is far weaker than people think. You know, we got people in this country that most people in this country, man, if their cell phone goes down for 2 days, it's chaos, right? I mean, absolute chaos. So, I mean, something as simple as a sun flare, which we had a couple hundred years ago, that had zero impact whatsoever because we weren't dependent on anything electrical. Everything's dependent on electrical now. And my first real life lesson in that was Katrina. A little bit of water, okay, and I'm minimizing that a little bit, but that entire state turned into absolute anarchy. And I went down there months after Katrina, and there were buildings burning, and the police and the fire department were saying, we don't have the people to respond. Stay away from there. We're just going to let it burn because someone had set it on fire, a strip mall. And it's like, that was months after Katrina. So this is a very fragile country that we live in terms of infrastructure. I think that there's many strong people. A lot of those are in this chat and are on this video stream. But the infrastructure itself is extremely weak. And something, whether it's from natural or whether it's some type of enemy or terrorist action, taking down the power grid would be absolutely devastating if it was down for more than a very short period of time. If it was something we couldn't get up quickly, I think that, you know, things could devolve into anarchy extremely quick.
Oh, absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Just down the street from my company, they're building another gas station mini mart kind of thing, and several times during the construction, they've been digging and cut the power line or cut the internet line. And then boom, my business is down for a day. And that's by an accident. Imagine what somebody doing stuff with malintent could do.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I picked out another comment here I want to highlight. So Eddie here, I know he's been a long time viewer of mine, and he served in the Marine Corps. He was a staff NCO, if I recall. A scout sniper, and I know he's been to like Vietnam. He just says he went to China, and he said when he was in China, he saw a lot of their weakness. Now, I want to expound on that a little bit because I want to point out that the Chinese, yes, they, you know, technologically they are a pure threat. They have, you know, their version of F-22, and you know they're up there in you know, their naval production and everything else. And absolutely, I don't want to take anything away. Like, they are a pure threat at this point. However, let's talk about operational experience. You know, when was the last war China was in? From just off the top of my head, the last time I can think of is their invasion into Vietnam, and that didn't go very well for them. And all their leadership shortcomings were exposed during that incursion. And as far as I know, they haven't been in a major conflict ever since then, as opposed to the United States, where, you know, here we are with you know, 2 decades of experience, you know, staff NCOs, officers that have served in combat operations, and gotten that actual tactical experience. I mean, experience trumps everything. And I think that really points out something. That's why I wanted to highlight that although the Chinese have developed, you know, a peer capability as us, they don't have that experience in waging war and logistics and moving shit from point A to point B. I mean, if you can't master logistics in that regards, like, you can't wage a war. And I think that's one thing we have going for us when all these cards look like they're stacked against us, with the Chinese building defensive perimeters around Taiwan and stuff like that, that they don't have that major war experience that we have, fighting this global war on terrorism. Even though we've had shortcomings, I get it. I'm watching C-17s roll up their runway. However, when we were in Afghanistan, we were kicking the shit out of them. Okay, there's no question about that. All right, Afghanistan fell after U.S. left. All right, the whole time we were there, we were hooking and jabbing. We were beating the fuck out of them, and they retreated to Pakistan. They had little insurgent cells. Yeah, they had IEDs and whatnot, but for 20 years, Afghanistan was its own country. We got bin Laden. We dissolved the Taliban regime in a matter of weeks when we first went in, and the whole time we were there, we ruled the table.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Well,
Yeah.
Brent, I'll say this. I'm not one bit concerned about our military defeating the Chinese military or any other military on the planet for that matter. I have no doubt that they are the finest military in the world, and we have the greatest capabilities in the world. And going one-on-one with any military for however long it takes, that we will be victorious. I think that's always been the case since the beginning of the history of the country. You know what? My real fear is, my concern is with the voters of the country. Because if they're not supporting our military and they're not supporting our military action and they're not in it to win it, the military's neutered. You guys, you don't get to go anywhere and kick ass without the support of the voters, not for very long. That's my concern, is those weak Americans that we have that are all about safety and don't give a crap about freedom. That's my biggest fear. I know our military can do it, but if you don't turn that mad dog loose, then he just stays chained up and he never gets to do what he needs to do.
Yeah, somebody just posted here in one of the comments that China has a 300-to-1 ratio. And yeah, they do on mainland China and in Korea where they can cross borders, right? But we're talking about they got to cross a body of water, and we got a lot of missiles. We got submarines, cruisers. They got to get from mainland to wherever they're going, and we also have to penetrate to secure Taiwan also.
Well, that's a good point you bring up, Brent. Let's look at military history because it is a predictor. When has the Chinese army performed? Especially in the case of the CCP. So the CCP comes in the beginning in 1950 in power, goes right into Korea, and we inflict casualties all out of proportion on them to our own, and all they can do is achieve a stalemate. You look at when they invaded Vietnam, as you mentioned before, the NVA handed them their ass. Now, to be fair, that was 1979. All those guys in the NVA had just been fighting us, so they were the cream of the crop going against the pretty green Chinese guys. What Chinese got in their favor is there's a billion of them. And, like one of my commanders pointed out in early Desert Shield, when we had nothing in front of us when we landed, he said, yeah, the enemy's going to come. They're going to have T-55s. And somebody made the point, yeah, those are old Soviet tanks. And he goes, yeah, old Soviet tanks are pretty impressive when you have no anti-tank weapons. So the Chinese have numbers on their side. And while their equipment may be crappy knockoffs, how good does it have to be in some cases?
Yeah, somebody else jump in here. I'm trying to catch up on some of these comments.
Yeah, I was just.
Well,
just
earlier, B93 had a comment on there about saying that CCP would not have an easy time invading Taiwan. And he's exactly right. Although they're building one trying to replicate us, they don't really have a Gator freighter fleet. And they would find it very hard to get across that strait because in Taiwan, I believe it's only 10 or 12% of the beaches there are actually suitable for invasion. So there are very limited avenues of approach. And as we all know, when you have limited avenues of approach, your defense gets a whole lot easier.
Right. Yeah. Taiwan is got that in their favor that strategically they are, without having good to bring stuff into, you'd have a hard time doing actual beach invasions because they don't have a lot of actual manageable coastline.
Yeah. And the other thing about those Chinese islands they're building all over the South China Sea is an island is an island. It's there. I'm going to go give our Defense Department planners credit that they know where those islands exactly are, because everybody knows where they are. So the plan to flatten them and put them back under the water has probably already been made.
Yeah, that'd be something an Iowa-class battleship would be real good at.
Well, it's a proven fact. You can't move an island, so it's always going to be there. We'll know where it's at.
They are a little slow and hard to steer.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see something out of the Space Force. Maybe they'll interject some space weapons into the fray.
Hey, if you think about it, some of the sci-fi stuff that you've seen where you've got satellite rail guns that just hurl big chunks of tungsten at freaking Mach 500, that's as good as a nuke hitting one of them little small
It's
islands.
imperative technology.
Yeah, it's true.
It'll send it right back to the bottom.
What you got, Bruce? You've been quiet for a little bit.
No. I'm soaking it all in, guys. I feel like I'm almost just all these great minds coming together and reading the chat. And I see that, there's obviously differences of opinion, but I think we're all here for a reason. We're concerned with all of these topics, and this is all good stuff that we're talking about. It's kind of good to get it out and vent it,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
I talked to John this morning, man. I'm telling you, just talking to him for about an hour, like that cleared my head so good, because I felt like there's been 4 days of just mass built up, and then just as soon as I got off the phone with him, I was just like, man, we need to do a live chat and talk this out in the open and get this off the chest, because it was eating me up inside. So.
Well, like I told you, that's the big thing sometimes, is just talking about this stuff. Enough people don't do that. But there's a difference between, griping and raising heck about it versus talking about it. Sometimes that's all it takes, just to unplug that vent so that you're not like a pressure cooker and all that pressure is building up.
Yeah. I see one guy says that it doesn't matter what our opinion differences, we're all on the same sinking ship. And, that may be true, but, right now we're still at a crossroads. I hate to get involved in, political discussions and stuff like that. A couple of years, it wasn't too long ago that, the House, Senate, and the presidency were all Republican, right? Now here we are, House, Senate, and presidency are all Democrat. You know what I mean? So it's just the little swing back and forth. And the country isn't lost over an election. It definitely can set up the cards in place for that. It's not time to wage civil war because let's just think out loud here. Let's say a civil war broke out tomorrow. Who benefits from that? Because all these things that we just got done talking about with China and everything, who do you think is going to reach out to the communist Chinese and say, hey, come join our side and help us suppress this insurrection, right? You want to talk about not becoming the number one superpower of the world? That's the number one. That is the way that it happens right there. So, right now the battle needs to be waged at the ballot boxes. And that's just my opinion, guys. There's nothing is lost at this point. All right, we are never more than one election away from either losing or fixing something.
No, good point, Brent. Because everybody always says this next election is the most important one, which is true. And everybody always says we're one away from, but you pointed out we're one away from fixing it too. And, and you see that because what is one of the traditional things that happens in a midterm election of any president? he loses all kinds of seats in Congress. Maybe not enough to lose power, but he definitely loses some. None gain.
I agree. I agree completely, guys. That I mean, when you're down, the future's bright because you're working your way to the top, and when you're on the top, the future's grim because you can always lose that power. And my whole life, it's went back and forth, back and forth. We've gained a lot, we've lost a lot. I think that our biggest losses were from nearly 100 years ago and 150 years ago. I mean, post-Civil War, states' rights went away. I know one of the early comments that was made in the beginning of the stream was something in talking about states' rights, and I think it was Justice Scalia that said states' rights haven't been a thing since the end of the Civil War, and he's actually right. We lost a lot of those states' rights there, and I think that's something that we need to work towards getting back. And you're right. We're one election away from being in a really, really dark place, or we're 1 or 2 elections away from being in a really bright, sunny place. We just need to, we kind of have to figure out a way, and I don't know what it would be, but to gain a few elections in a row that you can hold power and get something done. And I get people that are also, I know there will be the comments that, hey, it's the 2-party system is the problem and blah, blah, blah. Well, I was one of those fools that voted for Perot. So you're never going to sell me on that. I told myself after that, I like Perot. I told myself after that, I'm like, I'll never vote third party again because of the hole that it put us in. And I'll just say this on what I do when I vote. I vote for the guy or the girl with the views that best support what's most important to me. Which is number 1, freedom of speech, which is 2, the right to keep and bear arms, and number 3, really just supporting our freedoms as a whole. That has an opportunity of winning. Okay, I might be a Ted Nugent voter out there if I could. That's how off the rails I am, man. I'm all about that stranglehold, baby. But if he doesn't have a hope in hell of winning, I'm not going to throw my vote away. I'll vote for that kind of mediocre guy that looks like he might win, because I did that once before Perot. I kind of learned that lesson. Some of you young whippersnappers that are out there, you may not remember those times, but I lived through it, and I won't do it again. So, again, yeah. One election.
Bruce makes a good point.
Huh?
Bruce, you're making a good point there, because if you look back at both of Clinton's elections, you had the Reform Party there. Clinton won, but at no time did he have over 50%. So that means more than half the country disagreed with him.
That's right. But it didn't count, though, in the end, did it?
No, it didn't and stuff. You're exactly right. So you have to look at things. Personally, I'm a libertarian in the fact that, everybody be themselves, obey the law, don't mess with other people's shit, and we'll all get along just fine. Politically, though, libertarianism doesn't really work that well, especially on the international scene. Whether we want to be or not, the United States is a world power. And when you go to vote, you have to think about what that vote's going to affect in Germany, in Japan, in South Africa, in Saudi Arabia, and so on and so on.
Hey, do you guys see these comments that I'm highlighting?
Yeah,
or is that
absolutely.
just something
I can see it, man. Yeah, Kevin Culver, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
Yeah, remember, guys, this is my first time using this, so I'm trying to learn this. And the reason I pointed that one out is because we have a whole generation of GWAT veterans that are entering into politics. Every time on the news, I keep seeing, especially recently, they keep bringing in these politicians that they served in the Marine Corps, they served in the Navy, Air Force, whatever. And get that out, because the next generation, or the current generation moving to the next generations, these guys entering into politics, right? All these guys that were, staff NCOs, NCOs, officers, platoon commanders, company commanders, in Iraq and Afghanistan, entering into the political spectrum. So, and they're combat veterans. So I definitely think there's hope for this country moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, Brent. I mean, we are in a rough patch right now.
Mhm.
Where you at, John?
I'm right here.
He's froze. He looks like he's deep in thought. He's like that
Yeah.
thinking man.
No, I had to go get the jar out.
Oh, good for you.
Uh-oh, we're
talking
getting
about
desperate.
that.
I'm an
Well, I'm
old
on my
man.
third-
It's getting close to my bedtime.
Yeah, I'm on my third beer here, so I don't know if we want to find a good stopping point and wrap this up or keep driving. But
I'm good.
you guys let me
I'm
know.
good for how
I'm
long
good.
you want to.
I think it was a very successful stream, Brent. I mean, I'm going to tell you that I think you did a really good job. I know it was like absolute sausage making chaos in the beginning, but this actually worked and worked pretty well.
Yeah,
I think Brent did an outstanding job. I think Brent did a fine job.
Absolutely.
Good job, Brent. Yeah, you're going to get like.
my face staring at the screen.
Did you have comments? A lot of views.
I think a couple people deleted it real quick, but I was like, I need to test this, and I hit start stream. I thought it was going to give me like a final warning or something, and then it just went live. But anyways, is there any other things we want to hit before we call it quits on this?
Oh, there's one thing I wanted to touch on, and you guys might find this anecdotal, but did y'all listen to Tal Sniffer's address yesterday?
Yes, I did. I listened to it.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying this is something that I noticed. To me, he kept repeating things that made it sound like he didn't expect to be around as president very long, because he kept talking about, I'm not going to pass this on to the next president. I'm not leaving this for the next president. I'm not leaving this for the next president. I'm like, you still got like 3.5 years. What do you mean not leaving it for the next president? You planning on leaving in another week or two? Is this like some kind of little Freudian slip here? What, or is your dementia acting up? What's going on here, dude?
Just on the presentation level of that speech, let's not even just comment off to the side. I mean, I've seen fifth graders do better speeches presentations.
Thank you.
Well, what blew my mind is, regardless whether you're Republican or Democrat, or voted
I say
for,
the same thing about a Republican.
I mean, but regardless whether you voted for him, like when all this started unfolding, the fall of Kabul, like, where are you, dude? Like, come out, be a leader, stand in front of the American people, tell them what's going on. This guy in the sidelines. Like, I'm telling you, if this was a Marine Corps operation and he was the commander of troop, that guy would be relieved on the spot. General Mattis did it in the middle of a firefight. Right?
You're the freaking commander in chief and the president, and you've got an embassy that's getting surrounded. Where are you?
It's like it's 2012 all over again.
Right? Yeah, that was just the thing I wanted to bring up. I thought about that earlier, that it was just a weird speech. I mean, I don't expect a lot from the guy, but and I'll go on record too as saying, in all fairness, I seriously think what's being done to him is criminal. I think it's elder abuse. There are people behind the scenes that are abusing that man.
Yeah, I think he had a checkbox to check, which was for him. I'm president. I mean, hey, top job in the country, right? I mean, you don't get to be a bigger dog than that. And he's checked it, and he's realized how much work it actually is. I mean, every freaking president we get that is he gets gray hair in 4 years. It's a stressful job, and it's a busy job, and he's one of the oldest presidents that we've had, I believe, at least in a long time. So that's pretty tough. That's pretty tough for him. I just think that maybe it may be. I've always felt, call me a conspiracy theorist or whatever you want, that he was going to hand over the reins to Kamala. Because look, if he hands over the reins to Kamala, what goes down in the history book? He's the reason that we had our first female president, our first black president. They've already tried to get elected. Hillary, she couldn't. She failed on that. And he can just hand it to her. But listen, I may be wrong, and we'll come back and we'll revisit this in a few years to see if I'm right or I'm wrong. But I would be so surprised if he poses a serious threat to whatever candidate Republicans come up with in the next election to oppose him. I'm just not seeing him as being a strong person whatsoever.
No, I agree with you, Bruce. He's not strong. He's not a leader. And this is what's going to be interesting in the world, in a few months, is there going to be an Iran hostage crisis situation happen again. Clearly, he doesn't have the wherewithal to react with resolve. And I bet you the troop surge in there to cover the evacuation, that was probably a pre-planned event. You know what I mean? That kind of an if-then scenario where things could happen automatically. I don't think he called up and, Central Command there and say, hey, send everybody from Kuwait over to Kabul real quick. I don't think that happened at all. I think that was just an automatic if-then situation.
Yeah, I think that was pre-planned too, Pegasus. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
What else? I think that's Brent? Probably a good stopping point. I don't know. There's like an annoying distortion in the audio. I'm sure you guys are picking up because I'm seeing some guys type about it. But
I don't think it's none of us that are typing. It sounds like typing, but I don't think that's what it is.
No, it's not. It sounds more like a mic connection issue somewhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, hell, been out this for a little over an hour, so I think that's pretty good conversation, fellas. I think it's a good stopping point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, thanks to all those viewers, right? Thanks to all those viewers and all those that contributed, whether your opinions agreed with us or not. That's the American way, and I feel better. I feel better getting some of this off my chest and listening to a few really smart guys out there on their views of what's going on.
Well, I know at one point we had about 250 people on, so I'd say that's not too bad.
That's not too bad.
Not for a Tuesday night.
All right, so sign off. I just want to make sure everybody is aware that all three of these other guys in this chat have channels. Be sure to check them out. You got Bruce at Camparmament, you got Pegasus, and you got John at Alpha Charlie Concepts. Be sure to check out their.
We just lost Brent's audio.
Lost Brent's audio, but I'll step in and I'll say that John over at UW Gear makes some of the best chest rigs and military support equipment that you can get. He can do custom stuff, and he can do he's got stuff off the shelf. There's a weight, and there's a reason there's a weight. It's not because he's not sewing every day. It's because his stuff is in high demand, and he makes high quality equipment. So, and I'll tell you firsthand, my favorite stuff, I've sent a bunch of guys to him because when they ask me, hey, what's the best? I say, it's going to take you a little while to get it, but this is the best, and they buy from him. So if you're interested in some really nice chest rigs that are serious for a serious operator, look at UW Gear stuff. That's John. He's behind the sewing machine on all of that.
I appreciate it. This shoulder right here, that's up. This is how I usually sit all day. And man, I gotta tell you, by the end of the day, this shoulder is just killing me. I couldn't tell you how many nights my wife's got to freaking rub stuff on this shoulder back here to get that muscle to.
Yeah.
I can't wait doing that every day.
Yeah, so, John's my favorite stitch bitch.
Now, unfortunately.
Well,
no, go ahead, Bruce. Brent.
I was just going to say that the Chinese are the ones that are messing with our audio, for sure.
Oh, that's right.
I wouldn't doubt it. That or it's the NSA.
You got one more thing, John? Yeah.
No, I was just going to comment on what. I was just going to comment on what Bruce said. Just touching on like the custom stuff. Unfortunately, I'm so far behind and the wait's so long right now. I can't even do custom stuff right now. I'm having to just focus on the existing stuff that I've got, patterns for. And it's an annoying snowball that started like early last year because it was when COVID hit, and then there was major supply issues from all the mills and stuff shutting down. And then at the same time that started happening, everybody started ordering. So then I got a ton of orders and supply issues, and it just created the perfect storm. And that put me freaking so far behind the 8 ball now that it's not even funny. And I get it. People
I'm
hate
sure-
waiting so long for their gear, but
I'm sure there was a time. I'm
Go
sure
ahead.
there was a time in your life that you said, "Hey, it would be cool if my stuff was in demand."
you know, when you're first starting out and you venture into something like this, you're kind of like, man, how am I going to get orders in and, you know, get stuff going? And now it's kind of like, somebody give me a snorkel. You know, and what really drives me nuts, this really drives me nuts. I'm gonna get on a quick soapbox here. When people will say something like, "Well, why don't you hire somebody?" Really? All these years I've been doing this, and as far behind as I am, I've never thought about hiring somebody. Thank you for that brilliant drop of wisdom. That tells me that people have no idea, A, how to run a small business, and B, what's involved in a small business that involves sewing. I can't just say, "Hey, Bruce, come to work," because you got to know how to sew and sew to the quality level that I want you to. And if you don't, that means I got to teach you. Well, I'm teaching you that I ain't sewing orders and putting stuff out, which means I ain't putting money in the bank. If there ain't money in the bank, I can't pay you. If you already come in knowing what to do, you want to be paid for your skill and your labor level. I got to have the money already in the bank to pay you. If I ain't got the money in the bank already, I can't pay you to get you up to speed until you're getting enough stuff out to compensate for your own paycheck as far as the money coming in. It's a complicated thing. I can't just hire someone. I would love it if it was that simple, but it's not. Sorry, soapbox off.
John, you've never been known to go off on an internet rant, so I'm a little surprised.
I try to temper it. I really do. I've never let the Scotch Irish come out. The Scotch Irish side of me has never come out on camera. It's come close a time or two. It's come really close, but I try to keep that little demon hidden in the box because only a couple of people have ever seen that, and they all said they didn't ever want to see that again. So.
Yeah.
You got anything less before we cut?
No, I just want to back up what John said. About hiring people and stuff. It's not that easy. And I'm a guy in my company who I employ 70 people. And each one's a big decision, because along with having people, eventually, sometimes you have to let said people go, either due to circumstances beyond your control or the fact that they can't perform what you need. And that is an added level of stress that everybody just overlooks. So I feel your pain there, buddy. And finding the right person, it's a hard thing to do. It's a long search. It's well worth your time that you put in. But grabbing the first warm body with a pulse brings more trouble than problems it solves.
It does. It really does, because then if I put out, unfortunately, as Bruce said, a lot of people have got my gear and they like the quality. Well, the quality is at that level for a reason, because that's where I've wanted it to be at. If I suddenly start lowering that standard, then I jeopardize the entire business, because that's
You can't do it. You can't do it. Never do it. Never lower your standard.
Yeah, it's crazy, but yeah, I appreciate the shout out. Normally, right now, to be quite honest with you, I would normally be sitting over there sewing for about another 5 minutes to an hour, and then when my wife started bugging me, "Hey, it's bedtime, you kind of ought to get some sleep," I'll end up going in there and getting back up tomorrow morning doing the same thing on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So I just don't want anybody to think I'm sitting here not taking gear out. So anyway.
All right, guys, we're going to call it quits here. So, again, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks for watching. Free to leave a comment. And look at this last comment. Pegasus looks like it should be
This is for
Commander-in-Chief.
Pegasus. I'm giving him this Navy salute. My
Oh, yeah,
commander.
that British salute. That'd be the British one with the clap the heels together.
All right, gentlemen. Good night.
All right.
Good night.